Welcome to another episode of Core Conversations, where our goal is to help you fuel, use, and rest your bodies in ways that unlock its innate abilities for physical and mental health. My name is Robbie Harmon, and today we have Lon Henderson with us. Lon is the CEO and founder of our company, Ampelis, and he's been on before, but in case you didn't catch that episode, we'll introduce Lon briefly, but his introduction is harder than most because he's done so many things, not just professionally, but in life, that make him, somebody that's worth talking with and getting to know, and uniquely capable of discussing our topic today, which is relationships. But Lon has had a very successful career in business, starting companies, being involved in philanthropic endeavors and in the arts, and not just in business, where he's founded an investment advisory firm and been involved in various private equity projects and real estate projects. He's done, with his spouse Carrie, years of humanitarian service abroad, and devoted his life in church service and helping and lifting and serving others and helping them through their problems. And so he's gained, I think, some unique insights from not just living his life and having his own relationships, but also counseling people and helping people navigate their own relationships, which is maybe a great tutor in life. So,
Robbie, you will speak at my funeral. I keep saying it every time I get an intro from you, so I'm ready. I'm ready to die.
All right. Don't die. We don't want that. But today we are excited to talk about relationships. And it was fun as we brainstormed, what topic should we discuss on this next podcast? And we came to the topic of relationships. Is you're talking about different things we've done in our company and frameworks and models and how they apply in business. And it was kind of this moment of saying, what really, the way they really apply and matter most, and the research we've done and the things we've been involved with mental health and addiction recovery, is relationships are right in the heart of it all.
Yeah.
So,
exactly. It's interesting when you even look at the topic and you look at some of the great writings. I mean, even Covey, the speed of trust, or the power of negotiation, or you think of all the breadth of just doing business, running a family. It comes back to a relationship. And I love it also that it's core to our framework. Relationship with others is one of the verticals, of course, of that tri-ven of finding meaning. And so, it is critical. And of course, the research we're going to talk about today and real life application will prove this in spades.
And just so people know, if they haven't heard of prior episodes, that model you refer to, the tri-ven, is a model that we came to after a lot of reading and research and trying to simplify that into something that makes it easy to communicate. But do you want to share what that is?
Yeah, for sure. And I think the prelim to that is the many different directions that we went to try to figure out what is meaning. And it was your challenge. We had talked about meaning, and we were pursuing things around happiness and meaning that really fueled corporations, families, and all the stuff that we were doing, especially with high net worth individuals. But the framework, which was kind of serendipitous, and how it was discovered in an offsite, that was also preparatory. I mean, it was post a lot of preparation. People reading history, philosophy, theology, whatever it was. I mean, just many, many different categories of seeking what is meaning. And as we discussed it as a group, where did you find in your life, when life was engaging, that you felt like, I'm doing something meaningful? And I share that question that we asked because we were studying people like Nelson Mandela and, Viktor Frankl, and everyone had read the book, Man's Search for Meaning, but all the different personalities that we were studying and going through history. But everything that was on a piece of paper that was literally a brain dump came into three categories. One was in the area of spirituality, being connected to God, divinity, when they felt like they were part of something bigger than just mortality. And they shared experiences. And so cultivating spirituality was one that just really emerged. And we now know from science and from research that people who live meaningful lives, that's one of them. The other one that came out, which was also very interesting, is that they talked about running marathons or being a concert pianist or whatever it may be, where they've developed themselves. Many of them were great athletes in that group. And so self-development emerged also very quickly about that is so meaningful when I ran that marathon. And then the other one that really started to emerge is when people began to share about someone who is so impactful in their lives, a grandmother, an aunt, a parent. And that relationship with others began again to emerge as a category. And then what we found is that as there was the confluence and a merging of those three, and there was actually a focus where all three of those are being touched, that really we all lit up and said, it is an individual pursuit. We can't change that people have the right to choose. They have agency. But with their agency, focusing in those three verticals, they end up finding what we call meaning. So yeah, relationship with others is critical to a meaningful life. And it's been critical in my life.
And I think what we want to talk about today, obviously the nature of this podcast, it's not just about physical health, but a lot about physical health. We talked a lot about sleep and nutrition and diet and exercise. And, but we talk a lot about spiritual health and emotional health as well, mental health. But the reality is that relationships impact all of those things. It's not just this emotional thing. So maybe we can start just with some context and you add to this. I'm going to just share some, but you add to this.
Okay.
Because what we know from, I love it when research starts to just validate things that have been taught in world religions for millennia. Yeah. And that's, I think, one of the things that's coming out of a lot of the social sciences right now and people understanding this with relationships. But, so loneliness, we've had the Surgeon General, he served two terms, but talked a lot about the loneliness epidemic. And he used research coming out of here, our community, BYU, that showed that loneliness is increasing early mortality risk by as much as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And so that's been discussed a lot lately. Chronic loneliness increases the risk of dementia by over 40%. A disconnection increases the risk of heart disease by 29% and stroke by 32%. So start to tell me relationships don't matter. Strong social relationships reduce overall mortality risk by approximately 50% in a study of studies, a meta-analysis. We've talked about how they dramatically lower the rates of depression when you've got strong social connection. We've talked about that in the past. It doubles resilience when measured by different stress response studies, having strong personal relationships.
In that same study, it talks about your immune system. Literally is an inflammation. Your inflammation goes down between 10 and 15%. I found a further study that says that you can take wound and how fast a wound will heal. If you have a vibrant relationship, that wound will heal 60% faster.
It's fascinating.
That's really correct.
So everything from wounds to, and then, some of the other stuff maybe we'll talk about later, but some of the things that we now know are happening can be measured, the difference between an in-person relationship and connection versus virtual. And we'll talk about some of those, but point being, relationships and investing in healthy relationships is not just an emotional thing. It's an investment in your physical health, mental health,
all the way around. Yeah.
So this topic fits, I think, very well in this podcast that's focused on unlocking the body's innate abilities for physical and mental health.
Yeah. Added, I know we're going to get to this as well, that the stronger those relationships with others and the more tied they are to your own personal goals, your own personal values, things that are really focusing inside that you want to thrive in, it's an accelerator. They are accelerators. How many people in your experience have gone through a college class, even a topic that they really don't even want to take, and they have had an experience with a professor? And they will say, this is one of mine. I loved microbiology. I'll never forget. I was a junior getting ready to my senior year. I was married, children were going to be coming and we knew it. And I went and had this microbiology class. I had to take it. And I will never forget coming home. I said, honey, I think I'd like to be in microbiology. And she looked at me and she goes, I really like finance, honey.
Says the guy, says the guy who's graduating in
Yeah.
finance.
And so that financial dream would have been shattered and could have easily, just because of the experience I had with the messenger of the message. It
Very
was that
interesting.
messenger. It was that relationship.
That connection.
Yeah.
And it sometimes makes all the difference.
Exactly.
Well, so, okay, let's start by actually setting the stage just with some of your background. I mentioned in your intro, I mean, lots of different roles, lots of different things you've done in your life: husband, father, business leader, church, lay person, but church leader, overseeing different congregations and missionary efforts. You've done a lot of different things. And so I would love, as you zoom out all of these different roles, what have all of them in total taught you about the kind of heart or essence of relationships?
Yeah. That is a really
Loaded
deep
question.
very loaded. And that was not one I think we had written down that I was going to answer. So I really appreciate you throwing that at me. But as you say it and extend it, I think something that really impacted me as far as a relationship was when I was a child. My father is a twin. And it's an identical twin. I mean, even sometimes the women, the wives of those, would sometimes pause. They were so identical. And it was the thing of the community. One was drafted, my father, and his brother went with him. They didn't want to be separated. And it's one of these magical stories of a brotherhood. But my dad, who was larger in stature, had shared a story with me, and it was such a powerful story that I was a defender because of a relationship, even against my own uncle. And I'll give you the quick how this happened. He was telling me about something they were doing, and this is when they were older, and my dad stood up for him and helped his brother. And it was the right thing to do, of course, but it came to kind of a cost to my father without going into detail. And he said, Lon, when I was a little boy living in Aramo, Idaho, we had 7, 8 of our friends together, and we were having a birthday party. There we were, little boys walking down the street, twins, same birthday. And as we were walking, these 7 boys were with them. They're going to a canal or going to some event. And he said, my brother turned to me and he said, now, Ralph, you need to know these are my friends. You need to walk in the back. And he said that, and to know my dad is just so loving, and he was such a fighter, to help and support people. I just kind of had this little tear in my eye thinking, why in the world, did you go and say, hey, these are my friends? But he was larger in stature. He was a better ball player. He was a better student, specifically in math. In fact, he used to change clothes with his brother during recess and go take the test the second time and give him the second score.
No way.
But he would do these things, but he knew that his brother needed that assistance and needed that help. And I thought, talk about selfless. So it impacted me at a very young age, and to see the success of my father and say, he didn't have to have the showboat, didn't have to have the spotlight, he didn't have to have those things. He was quietly supportive, and it impacted me. So as a young age, being the 5th of 5 children and having older brothers, some were athletes, some had challenges, I just kind of felt like, my role is kind of a reverse firstborn. I need to be an example. I need to love. I need to support. And the amazing thing is I have been the beneficiary. I have been the beneficiary in every fashion, in every fact, in every part of my life. And so the greatest blessing of a relationship, I think you find in giving, sacrifice, charitable act, and just who cares? I always tease my children. All this stuff is make-believe anyway. You've heard me say that. Robbie knows you've heard that theme. These things don't matter. But in relationships, be a giver. Lean into them versus what can I get out of this relationship? And I think that's one of the things that I learned really early. You mentioned my life. Went to BYU. None of my other siblings, except one did graduate from a local university or a community college, but went to a university, a shock to my parents. Went and took a Wall Street job, a shock to my parents. Got into a unique business model that led me to the thing that I ended up doing professionally, a shock to others. But I just believe that the things and the exposure that I've had, there's always been somebody next to me who's had interest in sharing. And for that, I'm just absolutely grateful. But it's been a magical life in the area of relationships. And my goal is that, I'll have a few people at my funeral, and that I'll be able to give until I die, give back, because it's what brings the joy. It does. And that's not a sales pitch, and this is surely not, my own funeral, but it's really what brings joy is giving back. Nobody's better than that, by the way, than my wife, and Carrie.
Yeah.
She's the soldier, the warrior of
an icon
selfless.
Yep.
Iconic and selfless giving. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of directions we could go in learning about just insights you have from whether it's church service or business, and how relationships have played a role there, or how we'll get maybe into a little bit of family, like what are you doing and how are you thinking about investing in and building those relationships. Yeah. But maybe we'll start to stay up here for a minute longer, if that's okay. So going back, you started to outline a little bit of the Ampelis mission and methodology
frameworks,
but maybe we could go there. We talk about our mission being to address this problem of emotional fragility in the world by unlocking the body's innate abilities for physical and mental health. But say more, how do relationships impact us in a positive way, or make us more fragile? I don't know if you have any other thoughts there that we haven't shared.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to focus on the physiological first, because it seems like that's kind of the big discovery. Mm-hmm. Right now, science is coming out to support really what it takes, to be healthy. And we've focused so much on what we take in as far as nutrients and what we eat and how we exercise. But even the ability, and you made this comment the other day in our recent influencer event, that the doctors are now saying, specifically psychiatry profession, so the psychiatrists are saying, you can't even develop a relationship until you have a base of physical, until you have a base of a nutritional foundation, even to start to move, even to start to think and start to generate. So when you have these two, juxtaposed demands going out, that one, we're not eating correctly, and then the demand that you have in a relationship, that I believe relationships are really created in a cottage industry. I think we don't go to school and say, hey, here are the relationships. Historically, relationships and how to function in a relationship comes from a home. And so if you look at the big picture, going back to even the 19th century, what happened is we went from agrarian age and the agrarian revolution to the industrial revolution and the urbanization revolution, where people had to move to the city, move from the agrarian life to just get work and to function and to provide for their family. And all of a sudden we see that, like, even my lifetime, I mean, born in the 50s, again, I'm 100 years old, so born in the 50s, but if you start taking the 60s, in the 60s, 67% of the households were married, okay? Today, it's like 37, 35%. You also take the people that were married in that 60s, the average size of the family was like 4 children. I think it's like 3.7, but just round up, about four people. Today, the average home has 1.5 children
in the United States.
In the United States, yeah. This is a
but probably a lower in a lot of other, like, westernized nations.
Could very much. In fact, I when I was going through some of these statistics, the one that really blew me away, and we start to look at divorce, and we talk about, now here are people who are married, and how many people divorce. I don't know if you knew this, but in Portugal and Spain, 80% of the marriages end in divorce. And so not only do we have less people creating families, we have smaller families being created. And I believe it's the cottage industry where we teach values and we teach morals and we teach relationships. I learned conflict by getting smacked in the naza from 2 older brothers. I learned negotiation with 2 sisters. And I had a dad who had 8 children and thought I was a pansy because he said that was really complex of how to get through some of these things. So where do you learn relationships? So now you kind of fast forward to the 20th and now, the 20th century, where the amazing thing now is we're having this loneliness start to creep in, and people are seeing isolation. So the psychiatrists and the psychologists start to come in with research. Research starts to come out about loneliness and about relationships and what it means to have a relationship and what's healthy and what's a harmful relationship. So then you get to the 21st century, and now here we are looking at a loneliness epidemic because we don't know how to create relationships. That wonderful cottage industry, that's kind of my new term for what's happening, that great cottage industry where we grow families and children and relationships is kind of a little bit of a thing of a past.
Yeah,
So
literally happened in cottages.
it did happen in cottages. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because you'll see different data, and some of it you see and you think it's a good sign, such as divorce rates are going down. Well, why is that? Well, because fewer people are actually getting married.
That's
or
right.
they're waiting a lot later to get
They've
married,
delayed it.
and they're not having kids. So great that once we do get married, we're staying married, but not so great that fewer people are actually doing it and having kids.
Yeah. And then you add to it the high percent of people who are having children, but not in a marriage relationship. Mm. And they now, 67% of the of adults believe that it's not morally wrong to have a child outside of marriage. Mm. And so you're having these conflicting, whether they're values or whether they're beliefs or whether, they're just a hunch that someone has. It's just okay to live this way. But there's not those I'm going to call it those moral rods in the ground that are teaching what we've seen has been really time-tested truth. I'm not on a religious wagon here. I'm just going back to what's created civilizations.
So this is not a question that we prepared for, but I'm going to ask it, and we can see where it goes. But values, you talk about, these things that we value, such as family, marriage. But what role do actual values? So say there are a set of Judeo-Christian values upon which the United States of America was founded. Yeah. And for a long time, people came and they came because they appreciated and embraced some of, if not most of those important values. Yeah. What role do values play in creating connection and relationship? And can you have relationships with people who don't share your values? We didn't prepare for this, but
that's a great question, and I'm really excited that you answered this because I had a service for our church that I was in Australia, and we had the highest rate of people joining our church from the Muslim faith in our mission than any other place in the world.
Interesting.
So I was told that. You never know what you're told, but maybe it's just a good old boy. You're doing great.
But it was happening. To some degree, it was happening.
It was happening, and so it was necessary for me to interview these members of other faiths, specifically in the Muslim world, and it was death for these people to join the church. The
consequences of leaving that faith and joining another church, a Christian church.
Exactly, and of course, what's happened for many of these Muslim families, they had already left, the Middle East, and so now they're here primarily because they were looking for a new way of life. But I would go through and ask questions that were more in that Judeo-Christian world of values and everything from marriage to health practices to, just some things that you would recognize and the Christian world would recognize. And I learned that they actually had an Abrahamic foundation of values that were absolutely aligned with the Judeo-Christian world. And when I would ask anything about marriage and about being loyal to a spouse or things that we may hold sacrosanct in our own religion or in our own beliefs, they were totally aligned. And so it wasn't like I had to teach a new list of and group of values, but they were holding to what I'm going to call these time-tested truths that had created great families in their own part of the world. I'll never forget asking this individual about, could he take the risk? I said, are you willing to take the risk to accept these new principles and join this new religion with your family? And he turned to me and he said, let me show you something. He rolled up, I might have told you the story, but he rolled up his arm and there were just a horrible, horrible wound on his arm. And he said, that is the result of a compound fracture. He said, my brothers had found that I had been reading just a small leaflet of the Bible, and they came into my room and broke my arm because of what I read. And he said, I think I'm ready to accept whatever the consequences are.
Wow.
And so when you talk about people living for a value, and you think about anything from the Pilgrims to the pioneers to people, what they've done for values, they've done for their own belief, I think the dearth of that area is part of our problem, if not the major part of our problem. We've got to reestablish those, which will aid us in perpetuating relationships.
Yeah. Fascinating. This would be a whole podcast episode, because there's a lot of, I think, division where people are having a hard time, politically we're polarized and other things. And I think, why is that? And can you form strong relationships where you can really work through things? And if you don't share similar values, and that's an interesting distinction you made, though. It's not, sometimes we think of values being an outgrowth, and they often are, of religious teachings or spiritual traditions, but it's like these ubiquitous values that cut across all the world religions are the ones that maybe are, when people depart from those, that's the bigger issue. It's like, we're no longer valuing life, or we're no longer valuing whatever other things. It's not so much between religious or even cultural traditions and values. It's ubiquitous values versus more like secular, self-centered.
And in every religion, and I mean, across the board, you're going to find the fanatic, the outlier, who is taking that portion and becoming radical. But I mean, I used to go from home to home throughout, Australia, and I saw all of Australia as much as I could from my area. I mean, our area is like 2.5 times the size of Texas, but there were Muslim homes, there were, Jewish homes, there were English homes, and of course that was a penal colony, I mean, originally. And so we had those who believed in nothing.
Very diverse.
Very diverse. But as they began to focus on things that were, I'm going to use the term, time-tested, this is what we do in our family. There was amazing unity as people began to find these principles, and I'll call them values, I'll call them best practices, that brought fruit. They brought results. And more times in my life, I've had to say, is this true or is that true? You can see it, and I said this in our first podcast, you can see by the fruit. You can see what it brings. And relationships that are engaging, where you're both thriving, where they're mutually respectful, they're mutually beneficial. They're not one-sided. And even in negotiation in relationships, where there's a win-win, and we know that principle from a Covey principle again, but where there's that win-win, those relationships are, man, they're embedded, and they're strong, and they last. My greatest blessing is not only the deep relationships, and I'm speaking now relationships also with God, but it's the longevity of those relationships. That I can call somebody from 30 or 40 years, and it's, at least they're telling me they're glad to hear that I'm calling them. But it's those relationships of people that I love. But yeah, I can't go off on the.
I got us down a rabbit hole. I don't know how I got here, but I'm going to keep going.
Go ahead.
Okay, is that okay?
I'm not prepared.
We're off script,
we'll
but it's good because it's so so real. It's so
natural.
You have been uniquely good at what I'll call intentional living, and everything from you and Carrie spending time and effort writing down your values and defining those values. And we've, as a business, we've helped other companies do that kind of work.
Yeah.
But what role does that play when you can actually document, codify, and then therefore communicate really clearly things that you value? Coming back to this concept of relationships, what role does that level of clarity have in relationships?
Yeah. This question, I really ought to switch to you, because you are so good at this.
Oh, I don't know if I am.
No, you are. I watch. I mean, I have a vested interest in your success, and I've seen what you've done. But I wasn't a writer, not a great white writer. I actually had a partner for 30 plus years who believed in writing things down, and he was the founder of the Daytimer, the Franklin Planner is what it was, the Franklin Planner. But Hiram would talk about the power of language. And he learned this when he was a young missionary, for the LDS Church. And, you can only think those words that that you've found a definition of, that you've been able to assimilate. I loved something recent from another great thinker who talked about, meaning. If you understand the meaning of something, it's not just a mental understanding, it's a heart understanding. Meaning takes place in both areas. It's the heart, it's the part of that body, but it's also the brain. And so when you write and when we have written and when we've discussed and been very intentional in the things that we've done, it adds not only clarity to my communication, but more importantly, it adds clarity to my commitment and to my understanding. I thought I understood something until, I kind of started my oldest and I start to share it, and I could tell by she really got it, but maybe too much in the wrong direction. And thank heavens for our youngest, because the oldest started to help explain it as well, and the water got to the end of the row. But writing is so vital, and discussing it is so vital. I've been in so many meetings, whether it's been in the ecclesiastical world or in the business world, where I've come prepared with the direction. I knew the direction. I'd had this great experience. I've had emotion around it. I'm going to call spirit around it, and I'll come in there with the direction. And when I deliver it, I'll sit back and start to discuss, and I can find that, you know what? These other ideas are vital to this. And then I'll take it to another group, and the group that has the women in it traditionally is the area where it really gets, worked out and codified and completed. And when you do that, you find out that, wow, I did have an idea, but the idea wasn't complete. And most importantly, the idea lacked a relationship with those with whom I was delivering it. I'll give this example because you said in my own life, but I think you've heard the story. But I had a really good friend. We golfed, and I was getting into golf, living in St. George. I had all these, I had kids. I think at the time we had four. We have 6 now, but we had 4. And Saturday was just a great time to lay around, and, someone would watch cartoons, and I'd try to get up late and just, have a day. We'd burn it for 5 days straight. And anyway, I'd love to get out and golf, and I try to do it at least once during the week. So 2 times, maybe sometimes 3 times a week was what I tried to do. Saturday morning, we got up, kids were all roaming around, and a horn was heard out in the front of our house. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was a neighbor, but I went out and looked, and it's a friend of mine. He had a convertible. He had his clubs in the back. He said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "What's up?" And he said, "Well, we had a tea time." I knew nothing about it. So I said, "Oh, Carrie doesn't know. Everybody's up. She'll be okay." So I went in, and I said, "Honey, we're going to go golf. It'll only be an hour, And of course,
yeah, right.
Yeah. And so she said, "That's fine. We'll meet you at the park and, right next to the golf course." And so I went up. She was great about it. Went out to the front of the house where we had this closet where my golf clubs were. I mean, I kept them right there to go out the door. What a deal. So I went, opened the door, grabbed the golf clubs, grabbed the golf clubs, and it was almost audible. Put them back. I'm like, I got a golf game. Put them back. And it was it made such an impact on me that I put them back, and I went back and said to this friend, his name was Todd, I said, "Todd, I can't go." And, he's pushing back against it. But I came back, put the clubs back, and we literally sat down and began 2 major traditions in our home. And it was the birth of traditions. It was birth of a methodology of raising those children. And I was very intentional anyway in how we were raising our children. But it put something in motion that happened every Saturday. And it happened every Saturday morning. And to this day, I think there's remnants of that in our children. They've believed in it, and they've tried to perpetuate it, and it's brought a yield. Brought a yield. So when you talk about a relationships sometimes are brought by a real great game plan. Relationships have to be worked on. This social interaction is kind of a physical fitness, but it's a relationship fitness that everybody has to go through. Yeah, I don't know if that does the direction you're going.
No, because I think that the intentionality with which you maybe starting with moments like that have then
perpetuated,
then catalyzed effort to write and to codify ideas and values that have allowed you to then communicate and enact different things. It makes the clarity with which you engage in the relationship building real.
That's a nice analysis of it. I think the thing to mention, because you are such a big part of this, and of course your background has been so big in corporate planning and what you've done in your field, but when we went from the point of identifying the value, defining the value, even just the bold headline, but then defining the value to make sure that what we're saying is really what we all are agreeing to, And then I think the most important, really, I think the most important is to put those behaviors below that value. So not that only that you agree in the value, but if you believe in this value, these are the things that you do. The emphasis of relationships, the emphasis to be put on values, the emphasis on getting along often just comes down to the execution of the do. And the do to me is where all the magic is. It's all the magic. You're allowed to self-correct. You're allowed to have bilateral accountability. I've had experiences where thought I was doing, but I was reminding I wasn't quite doing it by my own family, or by a partner. And it was so easy to come back and say, yeah, we believe in this. I wasn't, I'm a fault. And relationships know how to say, I'm sorry. Relationships know how to say, forgive me. Relationships know how to say, how can I make this up? And take on the responsibility. It's a great thing that our children knew that mom and dad screw up. We make mistakes and accept them, But they also know that I have a right to teach and they have a duty, to take those teachings and work to implement. They also have a right to be fed, and I have a duty to be a provider. And that those rights and duties exchange and counteract all the time in our relationship as parents and children. Same thing with employees and, the C-suite or whatever, your direct report is.
Well, I want to go to the question talking about maybe you've lived almost 6 decades of life.
Yeah.
And
thank you. That's
talk about how it's just how society has changed in regard to relationships. We talked maybe a little bit about some of that. Like, I don't know if there's any other reflections. We talked about some of the statistics, but even in just how we're engaging. But before we do that, maybe just a statement that as I'm listening to some of what you've done and said, but then also knowing your family and, I think about how your family values work and how you prioritize and you very clearly communicated that this is something we value is hard work.
Yeah.
But it's caused, I think, a bonding in your family because they could rally around something that was a clearly articulated value that was enacted, and it caused them to draw closer and have stronger relationships around something that was a shared value. And I'm just listening to you talk and I'm thinking about, isn't that true anywhere? Like the clearer we can be with the things that are important to us and things that we really value allows us to engage with others in ways that are most edifying, mutually edifying.
Yeah. Yes.
And so there's,
and not every value that I may have or that my wife, Carrie, may have, do our children really want to make part of their life? And that's okay. That's okay. I'm not going to judge them saying, oh, this is really one of your key values you ought to have. There are some values that are kind of sacrosanct. I mean, there are those values that they naturally have in common. And I think that's why our relationships are good in our family. Everyone has issues, but I think we have a pretty special, experience. I mean, a pretty special family. I feel privileged anyway to be in the family because you have such great kids.
You created it, well, you and Carrie, so you
still feel like I'm the lucky one. But this concept, I'm going to use the concept of work, and you know how I feel about work, and I know how you feel about work. And the sweat of the brow is a principle that I just am a believer in, and I believe that it brings on sacrifice and labor. And one of the things, as you know, that we did very early in our company is we're helping these great estates, these 100 millions to $1 billion. I mean, these really very successful, amazing, husbands and wives who have created these enterprises. And the thing that has been so interesting in that whole area is that they were usually driven by some values, but they actually had also a goal. And sometimes those were monetary goals. And we saw a lot of debris on the side of the freeway as they were driving to get that goal. And so many times they would stop and say, I was going so fast after this goal, and I did have these important values. I may have missed a couple that I maybe should have had in my family. Help us round this thing out. Help us round out these values. And so I guess I share that we have that need in a family. And this is a personal thing, but because work and hard work has been such an issue, in my own life, and I've hoped that that would be perpetuated in the life of our children.
In a positive way, it's been
In
an
a
issue.
very
It's
positive,
been such
yeah. Such an important thing, because it ties to sacrifice and all the other ancillary things that come, and lacking of entitlements and all the other things that, come to the picture of hard work. We've gone and looked for a place where we can work real hard. And you know about this. We ended up finding some property in Idaho. It's a great place to learn skills, some of the agrarian skills, as well as some of the skills from cutting a board or nailing, building, farming, cattle, whatever it may be. But we've been able to create a little something that will be really great for our children, but I'm mostly excited for the grandchildren, because they will experience real life work and the consequences of success and the consequences of failure, at least short-time failure, until they correct. And so we have made this an experience and an experiential learning moment for all the children. But before we ever got it, we just went to everyone and said, you know what, we're going to review our values. We did that a few years ago. Everybody saw the behaviors. We said, we have a few values that you can select to opt in. If these are important for you, we are going to be making some acquisitions in some area, and you just tell us if you think this is important. And we took all of our family up to this pristine piece of property and had an experience. And there in the mountains, they were thinking, wow, what a cool place. This would be kind of neat to be part of one day, and said, hey, we're going to buy this. Now, this is what it's going to take. And if you have any interest, you know what? This is the toll you have to pay. And get ready to go to work, but it will bless your family. And we didn't have any naysayers. Everybody had signed up. So, you don't have to have a big piece of property. You can have something else that you're doing, and it could be around any commonality of value to align those relationships. And relationships have to be labored. You have to lean into them. And it's not really quantity. And it's surely not digital, but it's quality as well. Let me say, it is quality. It's not quantity. And so the quality of those relationships give a lot of those same mental and physical benefits as if you had many relationships. And that's what the research has been able to bear out.
How do you see the headwinds of our modern world, whether it's technology or just the pace of life, or the nature of work, whatever things have changed over the last 30, 40, 20 years, like how are those, just our current world and the things that we have to deal with and navigate and adapt to, what are some things you're noticing about how those are impacting relationships?
You should not have asked that question. I mean, we did not have this on the sheet, and this is one you shouldn't have asked, but I have some real strong feelings on this. You know what? We're in a mess. We're in a major mess. Families are being destroyed. Life does not matter. Life is being perceived in a virtual game, from the amount of people who are gamers and high impact, caustic things to the brain games. We have just the birth rate, as I mentioned, we're now down to 1.5%. I think, 1.5 children per family. What do we have? Replacement rate is 2.1.
Yeah.
Okay. So you look at where we are with just relationships and the cottage industry of relationships, which is family and marriage. We're in a mess. Okay. So I'm just going to say that. So where's the direction? Now, I am a God-fearing, loving individual. So I believe that there is someone who has a goal to kind of get us back on course. But when we have the challenge before us, from technology to birth rate to resources to even AI around the corner. In fact, it was ironic, and maybe we can get back to this one little concept on AI. All of these things that are headwinds, a major disaster, whether it's physical or war or stopping resources, will align us like this. I believe that we're in for some challenges. And I think those who have strong relationships, who are coming back to these time-tested principles, who are living a way that have that support, it's not just support, but have that ecosystem of love and other things around them, they're going to get through those difficult times. But others will go through a horrible condition when society begins to tremble or teeter or somewhat collapse. And the great blessing, the great benefit we have for people who have strong relationships, those people will be hungry. Those people will be eager to have relationships, and it will be our responsibility to open up the doors, not boredom to keep people out, but open up the doors, and it will be accretive to those who have had these great relationships, whether they're preparation or whether it's, living a life of some of these great opportunities that come from relationships. It will be accretive. People will come, and it will be like a catalyst. There will be more joy, more benefits than we can even imagine. But it's going to take a rattle to shake the timbers to come back to these principles that are so important. Now, that's what I believe. What do I know? But I think that's the way. An EMP and all technology turns off.
Electromagnetic pulse bomb or device is what you're talking about.
For 30 days, he's going to get people's attention. Surely we're not going to be,
Yeah, what will matter in those moments? Yeah.
Yeah. What will matter?
Yeah.
We're going to have the physical things on the Maslow hierarchy of needs. We're going to have those things, but a compassionate act I think it will go through a society, through a community like a lightning bolt. And knowing that, 2 + 2 as people try to help each other really is 6 or 8, and how we can benefit, together. It's a model. It's the great model of a family. I used to love all these economic
reports.
Yeah, not just reports, but prognostications.
Oh,
They're saying, if you're going to have 6 children, it's going to cost you, $750,000, to raise whatever. And they would say, and if you do this, it's going to cost. And I'd go through that math, and finance is my background. I thought, really? I'm not going to pay that to raise these kids. Maybe I'm going to have to put them to work, but I can't afford that.
I heard one the other day.
Go ahead.
Right now,
Yeah.
today's dollars, it was 2 kids, and I think it was $400,000
a year.
No, to raise them.
To raise the children.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they must be being raised differently. They were being reared in a way that I didn't rear our children, but it didn't cost that much. And the amazing thing was, those children, to really love that household, became producers, not consumers. We're looking at the equation through a division model. Families look through division does not equate. There's a principle of magnify and replenish. There's a principle of I will create more. There's a multiplication model with family that's totally counterintuitive to a division model. My pie must be split in 6 ways. I have producers in my family that, again, I use the term accretion versus dilution, that are accretive to the experience. And when they start to get the model of a relationship and get the model of giving in a relationship, oh my heck, it is just magical. This is off topic, but one of my son-in-laws comes from Texas, and he will stay with us for a few days, and he'll do that versus stay in a hotel. Ironically, I did that when I would travel from St. George to Salt Lake and building our company. For a lot of reasons.
Stayed with your mother and father-in-law.
I stayed with my mother and father-in-law. And part of the reasons was it was economic. But the other reason is I was in an environment that was so much more conducive than living in a hotel, traveling with people who are traveling and just being susceptible to going out at dinner, and from health to morals to whatever. I kind of had a preference.
I live that life. You go work, you go to dinner, and then you go back to work, and you don't take care. It's just not healthy.
Yes, it's just not healthy in all areas.
Yeah.
So anyway, he now comes and spends time with us. He's been here for 4 days. He left today to run back to his family in Texas. But for these last 4 days, he's in our gym with me, and we're working out aggressively. He actually is working me out because I'm seeing him pump. He's strong,
pushing you a little bit.
He's pushing me, so I'm doing more. When he's on the pillows, he's
6'8". How tall is Jake? 6'6".
Almost 6'6". He says 6'5",
6'6".
but he's 6'6". Played football, great athlete. But he's pushing. And then after we finish, the last 5 minutes, I'm turning on the sauna. We'll go and turn on the sauna for 20 minutes and 15. At 15, I go turn on the steam room. So after we finish with the sauna, he then will go separately into the steam. I'll go upstairs. He has this unbelievable meal. Now, the last couple of days, he's drinking core, and then we'll have this little discussion together about things that are sacred and things that matter. And then he lays for his day, and then I'll go up to my den and my office, my home office, and go to work. He said today, this house has become a sanctuary. He says, I go home with greater energy to be a better father, and I go home to be a better leader. And I said, Jake, you've done that for me. I would say to our children, I lift thee, and thou lifts me, and we both ascend together. That's what relationships do. That's what he did these last 4 days, and that's what I hope everybody does or will do when they come to our home. That's what I hope.
It's a wonderful principle. I mean, it's
a true principle
related to what Spencer Kimball called the divine paradox, which is you gain by giving.
Yeah.
And there's interest. It's fun again to see the intersection of teachings like that with the research of
Arthur Brooks, charity. You know, we know the book.
Yep. And he talks about why are people who give more successful because they give, or do they give more because they're successful? And the answer is both.
Yeah.
But
he focused on.
Yeah, but you go into, when you invest in another person and you give some act of charity, there's a physiological response.
Yep.
But there's also a sociological response of people recognizing you as somebody who extends yourself on the behalf of others, and so you're elevated in terms of opportunities, leadership, and other things. So it is this divine, and then you gain by the fact that you gave, and so it's this divine paradox and upward cycle.
Spiral. Yeah. I believe if you go back to the Judeo-Christian world, I think it's bread upon the waters. You cast them, they come back 100-fold. Now I've had people say, oh, that's so naive. You cast and it comes back. And I think if you cast and you wait for it to come back, you kind of breach the magic. I had this wonderful philanthropist. I love him. And we had a magical partnership. And Hiram Smith was a giver. And he used to say, you know what? I'm going to give until I'm broke. And right when he was getting older, he says, Lon, I'm scared I gave and I'm going broke. Luckily we had some really wonderful projects that were harvested, but he gave until he died. And there's a principle there that I hope I can wear myself out in mastering. I'm a long ways from doing it, but I want to master it.
So just coming back to the idea, maybe we'll call this our myth busting question for today about technology, our modern world. A lot of us work from home a lot more. We do a lot of virtual meetings. Can you have, and I've heard both arguments from a business perspective about how's remote work, virtual meetings, how's that impacting business productivity? But maybe in the context of relationships, can you have an effective relationship virtually and that is as effective as an in-person relationship?
Yeah, and you both of us, I could ask that question. We both know the answer, because cortisol levels, the emotional energy, even dopamine, I mean, things do not react the same as far as, through a camera as it does in person. And we do a lot through cameras now. But even in our own firm, like the other day when we had our event, we gathered physically, and an hour before we went, we recharged. We talked about those things that are important. And I think it's vital. They're in that 85-year-old Harvard study, which we all know on relationships. It's, 734, I think it was, beginning people right out of Harvard. And then they actually went into the lower income communities and they've analyzed and watched these people. Now they're meeting with their spouses. One of the main findings is digital engagement isn't the same. You need to put away your screens and put away your phones in order to really connect with a relationship. And those are the genuine relationship that really matters. And so I wish, and I'm even, we talk about intentionality. We started this about 6 years ago, and we've kind of stopped it. But I think we're going to have a bucket when people come into the home. The children, put it in the bucket.
Your phone?
Yeah. If you need it, that's okay. Go outside and do it, but put it in the bucket and
be present.
Be present, be face to face. let's use those hands and arms to wrap around your neighbor and your brother and your sister, and those grandkids. And I think, it's vital.
There's that. Yeah, that one is. It's the reality of the world we live in. More virtual meetings, and it is efficient and all those things. But there is a toll. There's a cost from a relationship perspective, and you mentioned some of them, right? Like just the oxytocin, which is kind of that bonding.
I meant to say oxytocin. They said cortisol, but cortisol works.
That also it lowers cortisol as well.
Cortisol's
relationships and proximity, real relationships do lower cortisol.
Yeah.
So that was, I think that was correct the way you stated it. But even that oxytocin, like eye contact, physical proximity, touch, all those things do increase the production of oxytocin, which is this bonding chemical. It causes the bonding, and so you can really develop affection for another person through just conversing and things virtually, but you don't develop a physiological bonding the same way that you do just being sitting across the table like we are here, which is interesting how that works. And I don't fully understand it, but I know that science is proving out that there is a difference. And
I think that the appropriate, of course, and I'll always make sure with everybody they know who I am, because I dealt with a lot of the Samoans and Tongans, and touch is so important to me. They would always touch, even the Latin Americans. I mean, they'll touch and they'll hug, and I was kind of more that way than my German wife. But I believe, and I'll put my arm around you, or well, how you doing? And I just believe, especially with fathers and sons, the appropriate hug and I'm there, and even the appropriate grab and twist and whatever it may be. But I think we need to evaluate in relationships the ability of physical contact, appropriate physical contact. And we've taken contact so out of context, and we've pushed it in things that are inappropriate, that even in our trainings that, we're almost nervous because of what's been indoctrinated in our brains and in our teachings. But I think we need to consider very carefully the element of the human touch and come back and begin to practice that in the appropriate way.
How important that is in relationship.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's AI too, and AI is an interesting animal, but
there was a podcast. I haven't been able to get through all of it. It popped up. Maybe you've seen it. I don't know if you see everything, but it was Elon speaking with Joe Rogan, unscripted, going through the challenges that are really coming at us. And of course he went into robotics, and he made, this was not what I was going to talk about, but he made this really interesting statement. He said, the result of communism to try to bring equality and to be even with all people, he said, it doesn't work. And for a lot of, philosophical reasons, he said, but we're going to find that capitalism is what's actually done that. And it's because of the ubiquitous nature of AI and what AI is going to do to raise, literally to accelerate wealth, and at the same time to be using AI into robotics to take away from some of those things that are harder for the physical labor to actually do. And he says he believes that that's going to be one of the things that happens with the development of AI and robotics, bringing them both together. Of course, he's big on what's going on with robotics right now. But the one that hit me, I think, was there were 8 issues, and I think it was like 7 of 8. But he said the big concern that we have with AI is people who do not have meaning in their life.
Oh, interesting.
He said because of what AI will do for us and the ability, and these are my words, and he said it much more eloquently, but from laboring to struggling to getting immediate answers and think of our 3 verticals where we started, okay? Just relationship with others, self-development, development of self, what it takes to work and develop an attribute, a skill, a talent, and then getting answers immediately versus stopping, reflecting, being out in nature, recognizing you're part of something much bigger than yourself, connecting to this divinity, this whole cultivating spirituality. You move some of those, you remove them from the model. Of course, we're looking at it through our screen. Elon doesn't have this screen. You are going to have a dearth of meaning. But for him to identify meaning, I just want to be this guy in the background, say, hey, we got this model. Do you want to see this, Elon? And that was one of the concerns about the future. So it was kind of a little payday for us for what we do, but totally logical.
So you're saying we were ahead of Elon Musk.
I think that is but with no capital,
and
no harvest.
He's going to Mars and building rocket ships and changing the world, but we were ahead of him.
I love that.
That
feels
good.
Man.
That might be the only time.
But, there, as I keep using the term, there is this global, universal, galactic truth that's out there. And it's way ahead of Elon Musk. And it comes to the simplest of soul who's trying to figure it out. And it is part of a relationship. It is a relationship. I've seen people I love who are not God-fearing and don't probably have much of a religion, but I've witnessed them come alive in nature. I've witnessed them stand before a magnificent piece of art or a majestic, just a out-of-the-world, musical experience, and they cannot deny what they're feeling as those cells start to all communicate react to those, what we call that spiritual. We throw that in that spiritual realm, but for us and in the way that we think, and not trying to, self-perpetuate our own beliefs, but just saying, for us, our experience has been that there is something, spirit, that enters us that enlightens and fuels and impresses us to make certain decisions. And those are all that's one of the three verticals. So I'm not worried about the best thinkers, and I'm not worried about AI. I'm worried about what we may have to do to come back and get aligned with those relationships.
It's interesting when I've known people who've passed, but then when my dad passed, that was obviously the closest. Well, not obviously, but for me, it was the closest relationship I've had for somebody who's passed. And it's interesting to see the level of clarity that people come to as they're facing
death.
Yeah, death, the end of their moral existence. How clearly things that matter really come into focus. And you hear that all the time. It's almost cliche to say it. People talk about it. What do you wish you did more? Well, I wish I spent more time with people and relationships. But it was interesting to watch my dad just change and soften in things that became more tender, even because he was already pretty tender about relationships. But, I think that we struggle sometimes to think about this concept of eulogy, our eulogy vision for what we want our life to be versus the resume vision of what we want our life to be. And sometimes we get those out of balance, and we spend too much time on those resume building things of things that we want to do or things we want to accumulate and titles we want to have. Versus those things that you mentioned at the beginning, funerals, but what do you really care about? And what do you really, when people are giving your eulogy, what do you hope they say? And all the material stuff kind of fades away, and the relationships come to the surface. Relationships and faith and spirituality and all this.
Yeah, that's so well said. And the way that you said it in reference to your father and the experience, I know how much you still love and loved your father. And I think the juxtaposition of that is to have a death of those who may have acquired or may have achieved those things that are maybe more temporal, and those who have not invested in those other relationships, and the dark and the cold and the unfortunate experience that it is for those who actually pass. And you can't take any of this with you, but you can give everything that you are when you leave. And I'm not talking physical. I'm talking about an element of an attribute or a trait that's now embedded into something, that somebody now is going to do because of someone they love. I was, I think it was in your truck, or maybe it was in your daughter's truck. I saw a picture of your dad, sitting right there. And I thought, man, just good on him. Keep it going, because I loved your dad too. He's such a great man. But there's so many out there that maybe miss that. And if we can do anything in what we're doing today, I'll have to say, kind of in one of the takeaway is, there's probably few people around a table or, on the airwaves who hasn't been hurt by a relationship, or hasn't been damaged, or hasn't maybe even damaged a relationship. And that principle of forgiveness, that principle of making peace and leaning into a damaged relationship, I don't know what it does physiologically or mentally or spiritually. I know what it does for you, but I know it does a lot of great.
Creating peace
Yes.
and mending those relationships.
Yes. Making the call, writing the letter, dropping something off. And it may not be you're going to be best friends. It may not be that that's the direction of the relationship, but let it heal and let it go. And if there's anybody listening today that could take something that is probably most impactful, go fix a relationship.
Interesting.
Go say I'm sorry, or extend the olive branch, whatever it may be. Reach across the aisle. Yeah, you might be wrong, or they might be right, or they may be wrong and you might be right. But you know what? We need more peace. We need more extension over the aisle. We've seen what we've been through with stubbornness over budgets, and
Yep.
on the federal level. And right now, some of it is just because of pride and lack of being willing just to work together. And so we need that. We need that. And if Ampelis can stand for that.
What do you think about, the nature of the work we do, right? Which is, we're obviously about helping people try to thrive in all aspects of life, but we have clinics where people are coming to us who are depressed or dealing with anxiety problems that are really stifling them in life. But more broadly, I work with companies, or what we're doing now with this Core 7 product and trying to give nutrition and then provide the coaching. All these things are designed to help people, but what a barrier that is, as you're describing, especially within a family.
Yeah.
Like we've all felt that if there's tension or like an unaddressed issue or something that's just there, you feel heavy.
Yep.
And you feel heavy because there's physiologically things happening in you that are not healthy.
That's right.
And so your point about is there science? I don't know if we need to cite the science, because we've all just felt
it.
how ugly and heavy and gross that feels. And then when you fix it, it's like light, and all of a sudden you feel the way you're supposed to feel.
That's such a great statement, Robbie, because I think there's two things that you hit. One is the feeling when there is this barrier, this constraint, this misallocation, this misalignment, because of whatever, whatever this problem. But we have a dearth of something else, I think, in our community, and I think it comes back to the family, and that is leadership. There's a dearth of leadership right now. And in a family, there are certain roles, and I talked about rights and duties earlier. There comes a point where those things have to be approached with love, with candor, and with, stop the presses. We're not going on to the next event. We're stopping right now, and there's a couple things that have to be worked out. And if there's the right relationship that's been built, a bridge can start to be built as you confront, not in an adversarial way, but in an appropriate way. And sometimes not all together. Sometimes it might be, a couple on the outside, but it takes leadership to recognize that in a company, in a university, in an institution, whatever it may be, but especially in the family. So calling out relationships also is calling out a need for greater training, greater understanding, greater, execution of all the principles, but maybe not most importantly, but importantly, a call out for leadership. It's a call out for leadership.
When I'm just going to go back to your the comments about AI and stuff too.
Yes.
I talk to my kids often about what do the next 20 years look like, and
what's the career path?
What skills are going to be relevant and what skills are going to be irrelevant. And it comes down to can you communicate well? Can you formulate a plan and then move and organize people to execute on that plan? And can you really build relationships and influence people?
Yeah.
I think those skills,
they will be vital. I would add to it, can they recognize time-tested truth and not get, sidetracked on an AI solution that may breach some of these principles that have been around from the eons of time. And that's why, and you had mentioned this in another discussion, that's why I think history right now is so vital.
So important.
Because we have so many examples of civilizations that didn't work and those that did. And you look back to the founding fathers when you talk about relationships, what they actually studied and what they, learned and what they were willing to sacrifice because of relationship for things that were so so vital, so important to them. So I think that's another one to your list of 3.
So can we say this, and then maybe we start to wrap here?
Let's wrap.
Relationships are essential to physical health. They impact us physiologically, as we talked about in the beginning, in so many ways. Relationships are essential to our mental and emotional well-being.
Exactly.
Relationships are an essential part of spirituality.
Yes.
And it's not, I'll just leave it at that. They're essential part. And we're going to go here in a second too.
Yeah.
The comment we had before we started, if that's okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just going to say, maybe, I don't know if this is where you're going, but they're also part of economics.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's an important part of the future.
Yeah.
It's an important part of an economy. It's an important part of the world that is changing. And I think role of relationships is increasingly important.
Yeah. Totally.
And how effective you are at building them and influencing and communicating and critical.
And to learn those relationship skills, there's great things in text. There's great theories. There's great principles. Go find a mentor. Get the physical side as well. And again, back to, I use every time I'm here, I'm saying this, go look at the fruit from the person who's teaching those principles in all walks of life. Go look at the fruit. And not that you have to find perfect, but you'll find some clunkiness, but you're going to say, that one works. That person, he's got it. Find those.
Well, the last statement, and any insights you have on this statement too, and then we'll wrap.
Okay.
But just in scripture study this week, focused a lot about like what is required what are the attributes and the circumstances that are required to become more like God. We believe that's ultimately in our faith tradition that you and I share. And this is not obviously a religious podcast. Mm-hmm. It's secular, but it's secular, is tied to the spiritual. And we've seen that play out in real life with people that we work with in our clinics. But the whole purpose, we believe in our faith tradition, is that coming to earth is to ultimately learn how to think and feel and act more like God. And what really came out really clearly in scripture study this week is that you can't achieve that ultimate end of our very design and existence
in singularity.
Yeah. It's all about relationships. You can't achieve the whole purpose of being on this planet Earth without building and investing in loving, close, faithful relationships.
Yeah. And there's something not only in our faith, but in faith of others that I'm seeing. That relationship between a man and a wife, or between, more than one person, when you have that relationship, we're not quite good yet at not only understanding how that relates, to really make that relationship the ultimate way, and we have some great examples, but then to take it into the next rung of the relationships and to perpetuate it. The children, and then the children of the children. And when we start to figure out the interconnection of multiple relationships and the interconnection of multiple generations, wow, what a force to be recognized. And to recognize that is something that's a prototype, not a prototype, but that is something that's a result of an example of someone who loves us, a loving Heavenly Father. And to learn how the interconnection there with God and the interconnection with your loved one, my spouse, and the interconnection with the next generation. I sometimes feel, and I've heard this said in a different format, I sometimes feel that my relationship with my wife now, as we continue to grow, and I think of a spiral, we are actually kept in orbit now by those strong relationships of those children if I can put it horizontal,
right,
or vertical, underneath me. And I can see they are actually being fueled by the relationships under them. And when you see that wonderful imagery of those multiple relationships, you lock these intergenerational, love that can get through some pretty tough times.
I think there's so much richness in this conversation. Like I hope that as people listen, that at least they maybe have some thoughts that make them think, I could explore this a little bit more in my life, or in how I'm functioning in my family, or I'm struggling in this area physically, emotionally, whatever, and ponder from this episode maybe the role that enhancing and investing in relationships could play in addressing some of the things you're feeling. There's a
agree.
lot to it.
And my hope, I guess, would be by, you giving me this invitation and kind of thinking through this in a way that we've framed it today. My recommendation would be, as you've listened through this, there was one thing, maybe two things that you're prompt with. Don't worry about the others. Go to that one, and I used the analogy last time we were speaking. Let that be the tread of the stair that you're trying to get to that higher elevation. Get that principle, figure it out what that one thing is, build your tread, okay, on that riser of your stair, and perfect it. Go get those values that you've always wanted, define them, or go and heal a relationship, or realize that you have to lean in, realize you're going to be asking for forgiveness more, or whatever all these things that we've talked about jumps out. Little by little, a little becomes a lot. Go find it, go do it, and go listen to it next time. You're great.
Great
Robbie.
advice.
You're
yeah.
great.
Thanks for sharing today your insights and wisdom, and we appreciate everybody for listening, and hope that you found something in this. And please join us again. And we just launched finally this product we've been talking about that we hope can infuse energy and life into all aspects of your life and your family, and helping you really have your body and metabolic systems functions the way they need to produce energy to help you feel like you can live the life you want to live and invest in relationships. So it's called Course 7. If you put the promo code podcast at checkout, you'll get a discount. Getcourse7.com is the website, and we hope it helps.
Really excited about it. The excitement that we're getting from people who are on it. And if you're not excited about the product, all right, I'm going to go into sales mode. If you're not excited about the product, go study it.
And if you don't believe,
go read about it.
And if you don't believe nutrition will impact your relationships,
yeah.
Let's think about that. And give us a call or send us an email. Yeah.
Hey, thanks. This has been great.
Okay.
All right.
Until next time. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks.